So welcome back to Yerushalmi Terumot. The shir should be a zechus for all of Klal Yisrael. We are up to the Gemara on Perek Sheni, Halach Aleph, right, the beginning of Perek Sheni. So we're testing Aleph and Aleph. Now, ein tamin min al-tar, so you can't take Terumot tar for tameh. If you did, it's valid. Rav Yochanan b'shem Rav Yanai, actually just to put some context on that, the Terumah is valid with the Eved. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, Rav Yanai, it says with Terumas Maseh, V'nechshav lachem Terumas hem kadogan min hagoren. The Terumah will be considered to you like the grain from the granary, Kamlea min haYakov, and that which is the malea, that the amount that you're taking from the winepress. The Terumas Maseh that the Levim separate from Maseh Rishon is like Terumah Gedolah, which is taken from the Dagon and the Goren, and like the wine or the oil from the press. And the Torah compares the Goren to the Yaakov, and we have Ma Yaakov, it should be. Ma Yaakov, the wine can't be half-half, it can't be half Tameh, half Tahor. If some is Tameh, then the whole thing is Tameh. So that can be, and you can't have tameh and tahor. There's no metzias of separating tahor for tameh. Av goren. So also you have to separate from tameh for tameh or tahor for tahor. You can't separate tahor for tameh. But av b'shva'efshen, even though it is possible with grains that you can have partially some of it tahor and some of it tameh, with the wine it's not possible. Nevertheless, l'meidin efshen b'shiyefshen. We learn that which is possible from where it's not possible. So just like wine from the press, you can't separate tahor for tameh. It's either all tahor for tahor or tameh for tameh. So also yagad, the truma, the grains, ben hagoren, you can't separate tahor for tameh. It's either tahor for tahor or tameh. Mayat, if that's the case, that you can't separate truma from tahor for tameh, lo yeh truma. So truma shouldn't be valid even if you did it. So the Gemara says no. Mimenu kesiv. The pasuk later on says you shall give it Trumas Hashem to Aaron Cohen. The word mimenu, the satan mimenu, tells me the Eved that it is valid. Kol advarim. Now all the dinim which I learned from Droshos Simsukim, le'meidin or le'melamdin. First we learn them for themselves, and then we can use it to teach to other dinim. So the din learned first for the item itself, and from that is learned for others. Trumas Maseh is an exception to this rule. He melamedes, it teaches others, but eina lameda, but it doesn't teach itself. So there are two dinim which are learned from Droshos, which talk about Trumas Maseh, but they don't apply with Trumas Maseh itself, they apply with something else. Let's see. The Torah says, Nechshav lachem Terumas Yaakov, but this is Trumas Maseh. Limda Terumah Gedolah, it tells me Terumah Gedolah, normal Terumah, Shleitei Teles min HaTorah Tameh. You cannot take it Tahor for Tameh. Right? But Trumas Maseh itself, niteles min tahor ala tameh. That can be taken tahor for tameh. Yet Trumas Maseh has a different din to Terumah. You can't take Trumas Maseh tahor ala tameh. By the way, there's another din that we spoke about, that one of the worries of Terumah tameh for tameh is because they're meant to be next to each other, mukaf, and your wide one will contaminate the other. Trumas Maseh, there's no din of minamukaf. There's no din that has to be next to the grain that it's covering. You see, the Levi can be here, covering his grain over there. Remember, we came across cases like that. So that's also maybe connected to why you're allowed to take Terumah tameh for tameh, because they don't have to be near each other. Now, what's the source of the Torah for this din that Trumas Maseh can be taken tahor for tameh? Minayin. Where do we learn this from? Rabbi Yosef Shem Chizkiv, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yanai, and the Satim Menes Trumas Hashem. You shall give it Trumas Hashem la'Aaron Cohen. I say, she asked to do it in a way, you give the parents that are separated with Trumas Maseh, Aaron Cohen, they can eat it because in his state of kahuna, when he's tahor and fitting. So even if the Levi has Maseh Rishon, which is tameh, you should try and separate Trumas Maseh from tahor produce, right? So it's fitting for a Cohen when he is tahor and he's fitting to serve in the base of Mikdash. Kahana said this did. That Trumas Maseh you can take min HaTorah ala tameh is learned from the pasuk later on in Trumas Maseh. It says mikol chelbais mikdashai mimenu, all the fats etc. the holy elements mimenu from it. Take Trumas Maseh min hamakudash from the holier aspects of it, which means from that which is tahor. So we see Even the drasha teaches you the Isur with Tahor for Tameh as far as Trumas Maaseh, but the Isur only applies with Truma Gedola, right? Trumas Maaseh, the din is you can separate Tahor for Tameh, Lechatchila, right? You can go ahead and separate Tahor for Tameh when it comes to Trumas Maaseh. Now the second din, learned from the drasha, which is brought regarding Trumas Maaseh, but actually doesn't apply, and it applies to Truma Gedola and not Trumas Maaseh. Now the pasuk says Mikol Chebos Mikdosha Mimenu. Okay, he says the Trumas Maaseh Limzal Truma Gedola Shini Teres Min Amokov. This is what I quoted before. Truma Gedola, you have to be nearby when you take it, right? You have to be covering what's next to you. Vehi, but Trumas Maaseh itself Niteres Shaloi Min Amokov. Trumas Maaseh, you don't have to be nearby. What's the source for this? Minayin. How do we know Trumas Maaseh can be taken even not from a Mokov? It's learned. It says in the pasuk, so you shall take Truma Gamatem. It says Trumas Hashem Mikol Maserei Seichem Asher Tiklu B'nei Yisrael, etc. The pasuk continues. You will take Truma from all your Maasros Mikol Maserei Seichem. We learn you're allowed to separate Trumas Maaseh from any Maaseh mission you have. Echad b'Yehuda, echad b'Galil, whichever area it is in. It could be in another country. So we see that also in the drasha, which tells me you have to separate even when it's not nearby, which is mentioned with Trumas Maaseh, the Isur applies with Truma Gedola. But Trumas Maaseh, the din is you are allowed to separate it when it is not near you. Right? The Rishonim argue about the Isur to separate Truma Gedola when it's not near you. Some say it's Isur Min HaTorah. Some say it's Isur Rabbanan, and it's not real, it's not a drasha, it's an asmachta. Okay, the Ravid, why the Chachamim make a chiluk between them. Of course, Truma Gedola is based on an estimation, whereas Trumas Maaseh is exact. So therefore, you make an estimation, you have to have it near you. Trumas Maaseh is exact. So, okay. Let's carry on. Now, the din we brought with Truma Gedola, not Trumas Maaseh. There's another din brought in the drasha about Trumas Maaseh and applies with Trumas Maaseh and Truma Gedola. Now the Torah says, "Nechshav lachem terumas midogim and agoyim chumem and Yaakov." Trumas Maaseh limdal Truma Gedola. It tells me about Truma Gedola. Shlei teini teres elam min agomor. It's got to be complete. But here, Trumas Maaseh as well, niteres min agomor. It has to take from something which is completed. Right? All the fruit has to be complete. He says, "Kadogon menagen v'chamlea min Yaakov." Right? You can't separate from things which are not complete. After miruach, when it comes to the grains, and olives and grapes which are there ready after they've been pressed in the vat, etc. Right. Trumas Maaseh is different, we said, about Tahor for Tameh. Now we're going to bring a brisa which talks about Trumas Maaseh, Tahor for Tameh. Trumas Maaseh niteres min haTahor ala Tahor. Yet you can take it Tahor for Tahor, min haTameh ala Tameh, Tameh for Tameh, and min haTahor ala Tameh. Right? So you can have Tahor for Tahor, Tameh for Tameh, and Tahor for Tameh. If you can repeat that, very good. But you can't do Tameh ala Tahor. So you can do Tahor for Tahor, Tameh for Tameh, Tahor for Tameh, and not Tameh for Tahor.
This is a Trumas
Maaseh. Rav Nechemi said, "Shem she'eino niteres min haTameh ala Tahor." You can't do Tameh for Tahor. Kach eino niteres min haTameh ala Tameh. You can't do Tameh for Tameh either. So you can't do Tameh for Tahor or Tameh for Tameh, according to him. So if you've got Maaseh Rishon which is Tameh, you should separate Trumas Maaseh from other Maaseh which is Tahor. Okay? Now, he holds basically this heter. The heter is not just a heter for the Levi to separate Trumas Maaseh Tahor for Tameh. You have to do that. It's not a heter, but you have to do that. Okay. Seems from Nehemiah holds, if you can separate Trumas Maaseh Tahor Tameh, the Chachamim obligated you to do that. So the Cohen gets Trumas Maaseh, which is fitting for him to be eaten. Right? It's fitting to be eaten. So it's Tahor. That's what he wants the Cohen to have Tahor stuff. Okay. On Maider and Nehemiah agrees, you can separate Trumas Maaseh Tameh al Tameh, Bidmai with Paris of Demai, where you've got a suffix, where the whole obligation is only a suffix and rabbinical anyway, then you can separate Tameh for Tameh. Now, Nehemiah holds you shouldn't separate Trumas Maaseh Tameh for Tameh, you should do Tahor for Tameh. Now, Ad Kadun, it's all very well, we know he agrees, you can't separate Trumas Maaseh Tameh for Tameh, you have to separate Tahor for Tameh. That is, B'Shahai Alai, where you had Tahor Maaseh Rishon Ma'aseh Amin from that same type as the Tameh one. You had Tameh fruit, you got Tahor fruit. You got the same kind. So here, Nechemia agrees you can't separate Tameh for Tameh. If you've got Tahor ones, use them. Tahor for Tameh. But what about Lo Alai? If you didn't have Maaseh Rishon, which was Tahor, Ma'aseh Amin from the same kind. You didn't have that type, which is Tahor. You had Peres Maaseh Rishon, which was Tameh. You didn't have the same kind, which was Tahor. What would Nechemia say now? Would he say you mustn't separate Trumas Maaseh from Tameh on Tameh? Or maybe since you haven't got Maaseh Rishon, which is Tahor, so if you haven't got it, Nechemia will agree you can do Tameh for Tameh. So does he say you have to have Tahor? Or if you don't have it, maybe he holds it doesn't matter. Nishme'ina min hada. We can learn our question from the following story. Rav Hanania Antanaya Salek im Rav Zeira lachamad garar. He went to Rav Zeira to Chamad Garar, the hot springs of Garar. Zaven le kluskin. Rav Hanina bought loaves of bread which were tahor. He bought these loaves of bread. Okay? Kluskin are like loaves, maybe a bit nicely made loaves. Rav Hanina wanted to leave a bit of the loaves of tahor ones which he bought, so that he can use it to separate Trumas Maaseh on the Tameh loaves that he will buy tomorrow. You hear that? So he's separating a bit of the loaves today, the tahor loaves today, for the Tameh loaves that he will buy tomorrow. A different batch completely, but he will buy them tomorrow. He may not get tahor stuff tomorrow. So he's thinking, I might end up with Tameh loaves. So at least I use this today to cover the Tameh loaves. So Rav Zeira said to him, Let onon tzrichin chashin lechida. We don't have to worry for that individual. That Rav Nechemia. Rav Nechemia said you must do tahor for Tameh. But everyone else said you can do Tameh for Tameh. Right? Trumas Maaseh can be Tameh for Tameh. That's what everyone else said. So what are you worried about? So you get Tameh stuff tomorrow, you use your Tameh stuff for your Tameh stuff. What's the big deal? So you don't have to worry for that individual Rav Nechemia because Chachamim argue. And they allow you to separate Tameh for Tameh. So you don't have to leave any loaves today for the Tameh ones that you'll need tomorrow. Now in this story, Islach Meimah, can you honestly say that you wanted to worry about Rav Nechemia's view? If he had tahor fruit of that kind? I mean, if he had that tahor fruit, he would have used it. He definitely would have used it. It must be he didn't have it. He's worried he may not find tomorrow only the Tameh ones, and he won't be able to separate Tameh on Tameh according to Rav Nechemia. So basically Rav Nechemia forbids you to separate Tameh on Tameh even if you haven't got tahor ones available. That's what we see over here. The fact that he obviously didn't have it, and he was worried, what am I going to do tomorrow? And so you see, Rav Nechemia doesn't allow it, Tameh on Tameh, right? That's why he needed to make sure. What? Tameh Maaseh, the Tameh Maaseh can be eaten. It's not Truma. Maaseh. Yeah? So Maaseh Rishon can be eaten. So it's Trumas Maaseh, you're right, Trumas Maaseh, which is Tameh, there's not a lot that can be done with it. We spoke about this. Trumas Maaseh, it's like Truma, which is Tameh. You can't manage Truma, which is Tameh. So what are we saying here? He says, so why is he worried? He says, are you honestly thinking he's worried where he had the tahor stuff? No, if he had the tahor stuff, he probably would have used it. He obviously didn't have it. He was worried he won't find any tameh. Basically, the next day, he's not going to have any tahor stuff the next day. So he's worried, I won't find any tahor stuff tomorrow, and I'll be left with tameh, and Rav Nechemia is still strict. So Rav Nechemia answered, and then they said to him, look, you don't have to worry about that individual opinion. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, Rav Nechemia. So basically, Rav Nechemia himself would forbid tameh on tameh, even if you have nothing else, even if there's no other way. Right? So Rav Zeira said to Hanina, you don't have to leave the loaves, the tahor ones, for tomorrow. If tomorrow you can't find only tameh, you separate Trumas Maaseh from the tameh. Right? Like the view of the Chachamim who argue Rav Nechemia, and halachas like them. Right? Whereas Rav Hanina was worried, maybe tomorrow I'll only have tameh ones, I won't have tahor ones, I want to worry about Rav Nechemia. You can't separate tameh for tameh, so he wants to leave a bit today in order to use that for Trumas Maaseh for the stuff he'll buy tomorrow. So you see, according to Rav Nechemia, the issue to separate tameh is tameh, even if you've got no tahor stuff. Okay? Right. Be'emes amru ha'igul. Now, this was the fig cake, which part of it was tamei, and you can separate from the tire elements of it on the tamei elements, and also a bunch of vegetables. You can separate the bunch, some of the bunch from the rest of the bunch, and also an arema, sort of a container. Whenever you find that lashon, it means halacha Moshe Sinai. So the cases where a Mishnah finds like exceptions to the rule, halacha Moshe Sinai is received by per to Moshe and Sinai. Some say the Issa mentioned in the Mishnah not to separate truma from tara from tameh is a din Torah, and that was given to Moshe at Sinai. That's like the Rambam. Others hold the Issa to be tara from tameh is only the Rabbanon. And so it doesn't mean Allah Moshe Sinai, it means the takana of the Chachamim which was fixed, as if it was given to Moshe at Sinai. Okay. The cake where part of it is tameh, you can go ahead and be Torah from the Torah part on the tameh part. Part of it is tameh, ain't kula tameh, is the whole thing not tameh? He says no. It's connected with the figs. The figs are stuck together with fruit juice. And fruit juice doesn't join the figs to be considered as one entity as far as Tumah is concerned. So even though part of it is Tameh, the other part remains Tahor. Now, but in the end of the day, what's going to happen to this fig cake? When you're going to take Truma from the Tahor, from the Tameh, you're going to separate some of the Tahor bit to give it a Shem Truma. And when you call it Truma, to the Torah aspect, it's not part of the fig cake together with the Tameh one anymore. It's now separate. So how can you be Torah from the Torah aspect for the Tameh part? At the time when you're going to give it a name Truma to the Torah element, it's now separate from the Tameh part. You'll have to cut it open, and it's not considered one circle anymore. So Tifta, we can explain the case. You gave it the Truma name when they were still stuck together. So you're allowed to be Torah from the Torah of the circle for the tameh in the cake, in a case where you're giving it a name truma to the tahor ones while they are connected in this cake. And after that you separate it. In this situation, at the time when you gave it a name truma, they are part of this cake together with the tameh ones. The same with the vegetables, which are in a bunch of vegetables. Masnisa, the heter is only shenitmes, let's say you got tameh, some of it, but oida aguda, and even after that, it's still tied together. They were all tied together when some of it got tameh. So considered part of the bunch is tameh, part of it is tahor, and you can take tahor for tameh. If it got tameh, some of it when they were klachin, when they were single stems, and later on, you tied them together later, then loibed on this din was never said. And he says, but surely you're going to break it up into different bunches. When you're going to take truma from the tahor element for the tameh, you'll take some of the vegetables which are tahor to give it a name truma. So the time when you're giving it a name truma, then they're not part of the bunch anymore. They're now separate vegetables. So how can you be tahor from the tahor for the tameh at the time when you give it a name? They're already separated out. So again, tifta shekar lashem and the same answer. I refer you to the answer we gave before, that we are talking about a case where you gave it a name of truma where the vegetables are still together in the bunch. Okay, now, eged. Now, what about the heter? Some of the vegetables are tameh, and providing they were all tied together at the time. Eged shenitma. So if, let's say, the bunch of vegetables, which some of it became tameh while it's all tied together, vihitiru, and you undid it. Agoda, then you tied it again. Ma, what's the din? Do we say, look, when it was tameh, part of the vegetables, and you wanted to take truma for that, it was one bunch. So it's one bunch which became tameh, some of it, and you can take truma tahor for the tameh. But now we say maybe in between they got separated. You undid the knots in the bunch. Maybe they're now two separate groups, and therefore you can't take truma from tahor for tameh. A very good question. We have no answer. Now, after the Mishnah brings the halach of igul shadvela, right? He has to bring two more examples for this din. Now, why do we need to bring two more examples? Well, listen to igul, bring the cake case. But listen now good, don't tell me about the bunch of vegetables. Listen now good, listen now rema. Why bother telling me about a container? a trough of some kind. I asked you over yesterday, what do they translate arema for? The word arema. They give a translation there? They don't give a translation? Arema? No? They must. Have a look.
Pile, perhaps?
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, pile, yeah.
After the word aguda, a bunch.
Yeah,
It's got a pile. Well, they call it a pile. Right. So why did the Mishnah have to increase and learn two examples, the last two examples of a pile and a bunch? If I had the cake and not the bunch. I would have said eagle, shekulai, guf echad is all stuck together as one cake. Tyrem, you can take truma from the tie for the tummy. Aguda, the vegetable, she'ein kula guf echad, it's not all one group. Therefore, ain't a Torah. Maybe you can't take Torah for tummy. That's why I mentioned Aguda, that you can. If I didn't mention the pile of an Amrin Aguda, you can hold it in one hand, it's all bunched together. So they say they didn't tell him, you can take Truma for Torah for tummy. Arema, this pile of grain, it's not all held together, bunched together. Ain't a term, therefore I might thought you can't. Therefore the Tana tells you that you can. Right, it's considered a connection. You can take truma from Torah for tummy. Have a sorghum is the eagle. We need to tell you the din of the cake. Sorghum is na aguda. We need to tell you the din of the bunch. But sorghum is na rema, and we need to tell you the din of the pile. Okay. Yeah. And maybe also he says here. Oh, we'll come to that in a second. Actually, yeah. Now, once we mentioned halacha, you can separate Torah for tummy where they're connected together. It says if you had two igulin, let's say two cakes or two bunches, one's Torah, one's Tameh, then you can't take truma one for the other. Why do you have to mention that? So we tell you the din. Two cakes, two bunches, two piles, and one's Torah, one's Tameh. You shouldn't take truma. Why do we have to say at the beginning, you can't take truma Torah for Tameh? Is learned from Nachshav Lachem Terumaschem Kadagon and like Chamlehem in Ayakev. So why do you have to mention it? The Tana doubled and mentioned again this din to tell you that the halacha that we learned, one pile is tamei, half of it. You're allowed to take truma for the tamei. It's not only a pile of grain, but even a pile of cucumbers and pumpkins. So you might think they're clearly separate, discernible objects, yeah? So maybe you can't take the tire for the tummy, so we say you can, even if it's a pile of cucumbers, okay? I might have thought the heta with a pile is only wheat and barley because they're very small, and people don't take one wheat, you take a whole bunch of wheat. So therefore, even a big pile, okay, is considered one thing, and therefore you can take tire for tummy, whereas pumpkins are big vegetables. Like nowadays in Israel, the cucumbers in Israel are very small cucumbers, actually. They're very, very small. Maybe they don't get so much water there, but still. But the cucumbers are big vegetables. You buy them one on a time, therefore, maybe it's not considered davar echad, so we have to say that's also considered, you can take taho for tummy. If you had two cakes, two fig cakes, one was tummy, one part of it was taho, so each one of the cakes had tahar and tamei. You hear that? So each cake, two cakes, and each one has got tahar elements and tamei elements. Do we say you can take truma? Since each one you can take the tahar bit for the tamei bit, maybe you can also take from the tahar in the circle for the tamei in the other circle. It can be tahar from the tahar in one for the other one. Even though you end up taking tahar on the tamei in the second one. Maybe that's good. Very good question. The Gemara compares it to another suffix. The Yeva Kahada. This situation will be like the din that the Chachamim have got a suffix. Hayelafon of Shnei Karayim. You had, say, two piles of grain. Echad Hivrish Mera Mixas. One separated some of the shear. Oh yeah, okay. Let's give you just explain this case here. Now this is based on a Mishnah later on. Imagine you are separating truma. Okay? Yeah. And you separated some of the truma that you needed to separate. Let's say you had 100 sar, and you separated 1 sar. Now you should have done 2. It should be 1 in 50, right? So you should have done 2 sar. You only did 1 sar. Now, so I'm going to add another song, obviously. Right? So now, some of this grain has been corrected, and some hasn't. Because I've taken half the amount of truma that I need to separate. So some of this amount is corrected, some of it hasn't. So the question, the din is, you should take from the kri, from this pile, another saw of truma for this amount. We don't worry, look, if I take another saw, maybe I'm taking it from the part that's already corrected. We don't say that. We don't say it's p'tor for chiyuv. You might be taking from the half that's already corrected. We don't say that. But what do? We say whatever you took out, the next saw that you need to separate was tevel, and that becomes your truma for the remainder. Okay? And that way you'll correct the whole amount. However, you're not allowed to separate from this mixture truma for elsewhere. Because we're worried maybe the bit that you picked out to separate as truma for elsewhere was actually corrected and has had truma taken for it. You understand? So when you only do half, we say for this mixture you can separate another truma or whatever for this mixture. But you can't start separating from this for elsewhere. That's the din over here. That's the din coming up. That's the time they come in the Mishnah there. Reb Meir and Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov, they argue on that opinion. So that's what we're going to bring in now. So v'yeva kado. So this din is like the Chachamim who had a safek. You had two piles of grain. One of them you separated part of the amount, Trumas and Maasros, and the other one you only separated part of the amount, Trumas and Maasros. So each one, the din is you have to take Truma from each one for itself, but not to use for elsewhere. So Ma'oshi Trumizah there. What's the din? Can you take Truma of this one for that one? Do we say since each one you can separate Truma for what's in it, therefore you can also separate Truma to the second the table which is in the second one? Or do we say no, they're two separate ones. You can't separate from one to the second one, because you're also to be tearing from a kri on tevel which is in another kri. Talmid of Ruba, great children, they asked Ruba, Amalon, he said to them, the foolish man embraces his hands, he eats his flesh. You can't correct neither of them, not through truma from the second one, even not through truma from the same kri itself. This person is like a fool, he's got no hope. That's what they asked him, that's what he said. Okay? He's got no hope. Reb Chia, by the way, argues on the Chachamim in that Mishnah. He held like the other view, Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says you're in trouble. You can't take even to be Masakin itself. You hear that? He argued and said you can't even sort out itself. The Chachamim argued on that. They said you can. Reb Eliezer b'shem Reb Chia Rabbah, ain't Tomen Ma'asrin zeh al zeh. So basically you cannot, although you're allowed to be told each one to be Masakin what's in it, you can't be told for one to be Masakin the second one. Just like you can't be told from each one for tevel in the second one. It's the same thing in our case. You've got two cakes. Each one's partially tame, partially tahor. Although you're allowed to separate each one tahor for its tame part in its cake, but you're not allowed to be separating tahor in one for the tame in the second one. Okay, now, Truma Gedola, you have to be nearby when you take it. When you separate the Truma, it's got to be close to you, that you see what you're covering. We want to talk about some dinim about this. We bring a brayso. Hooray! Imagine you're bringing a lot of fruit in one box. Let's say you've got one cabbage at the top, and another one at the bottom. Some other vegetable is in the middle. So you've got cabbage, vegetable, cabbage. You cannot take truma or maaseh from the top cabbage for the bottom one, even though they're in a box, because you've got another species in between. If it is mechalik, it considers them not next to you anymore. Do you understand? It's not mukov anymore because you've got another vegetable in between. Adada tema, that's all very well, but she'ein sham halal. When there's no space between the top one and the bottom one. The min, is that it? And that's it. There's nothing, there's no big space there. And therefore it's not next to each other. Aval miyesh sham halal, if you have like a space there, and the other one is not entirely in between, you've got a bit of a space, then the din is Tomen Mashrim Zelzeh. You can take Truma top one for the bottom one. Okay? So since the other min is not entirely in between them, then there's like a space, then it's not considered a gap between them, and therefore they're in one box, and they're considered min hamukaf, it's all considered next to you. Kol beis hagitos, anywhere where there's the area where you take all the grapes for pressing to make wine, that whole area, that whole structure, echad is considered one. It's considered everything being next to you. You can separate truma from the wine which is in one vat for in the press for wine which is in another vat. Yeah, that's considered next to you. The whole structure is considered next to you. Kol beis hagrodos echad, all the whole grain area there where they gather the crops and do all the threshing, echad is considered one place. And you can separate truma from the tour which is in one for the other. Tani, we learned in the Bais Yehuda. Behold, this din is providing Shadei Tofesis Hagered Be'emsa. Now this din is providing that the grain, like the central area, the central pile, is in the middle, which is the main area of the goren, is around, is in existence. So then anything which are on the sides are secondary to it. And it's considered the whole thing in the base of God as like one entity. And you can be taken one for the other. If, however, the central pile has been taken away, then it's not considered one, and you have to take truma from each pile separately. You follow? So it all depends that the main pile is in the center. Ad Kedun, that's all very well chitin, that's all very well wheat is in there. Afilu kash, afilu teven. Do we say even if there's like the grains from the wheat, there's only straw left? Is that considered the main granary, the main grain area, and everything's one? You can take terem. Just having a bit of straw, is that good enough? Very good question. We have no answer. Rav Chagai by Rav Yosi. What about if that central grain was tameh? So now what? Everything around it is tahor. Do we say it's all considered one? And it can be taken from the one for another? Or do we say no? Since the middle one is tameh, you can't do tahor for tameh, then maybe the ones on the side are not secondary. And maybe we don't say the grain is considered one. And you have to take truma from each bit on its own. But he says, V'hainu, can you honestly say that noshuch, that they're biting each other, they're completely connected to each other? They're not. Therefore, they're not considered min hamukaf, they're not considered next to you, and you have to take truma from each entity in its own. Chavraya, by kume Rabbi Yosi, they asked before Rabbi Yosi, what about haisa mapa be'emsa? Between the piles of grain, you had some sort of a cloth or something in between them. Does that make a distinction and divide them up, and therefore they're not close to you, and you can't take truma one for the other, or not? He says, this is the case of 5 sacks in the granary, begoren, the tiny learned in the Brisa, chamisha sakin, 5 like bags of grain, which are begoren in the granary, Tomin and Mastrim Zelzeh, you can take truma and master one for the other, even though the grain is in with these separate bags, the granary area structure just puts them all together, it's considered one. And you can take truma one for the other. The same thing here then. If these piles of grain are separate through a cloth, the goren, the structure, just puts them all together again. Rebbe Lezer Omer Tarmin. Rebbe Lezer said you can take truma from the tire for the tameh. Tiny Relaya Omer Mishum Rebbe Lezer. Tarmin min atamer ala tameh belach. You're allowed to take tire for tameh when it comes to liquids. That means pears, fruit which are wet and moist, but not with dry fruit. Now here, the Tanakhama don't like you to take truma tire for tameh. Rebbe Lezer allows you to do it. Right, according to the Rambam, the Tanakhama holds it's asman Torah. Huh? We're going to see now. So Rebbe Lezer says, Rebbe Lezer, tameh no Torah, tameh if it's lach, if it's moist, but not if it's dry. So Kesar, let's see. Kavash zeisim b'tumah. So if you pickled olives, this is Rebbe Lezer now. If you pickled olives in a vinegar, b'tumah, now you want to separate truma from other olives which are tahor. So what can you do? Maybe mashvech. Now what you do is you bring a funnel. She'ein b'piv kebetza. The mouth hole, the bottom mouth hole of that funnel can't hold a kebetza. Kebetza is the size to receive tumah, right? So the mouth hole of the funnel must be pretty small. So now you fill up the funnel with zaysim, with tahor olives. But nice and you put it on top of a barrel which has got the tameh olives. So the olives which are in that funnel are a connection between the olives which are tameh in the barrel and the tahor olives which are in the funnel. And that way you can be mafish truma from the olives in the funnel for the olives which are tameh in the barrel. But nimsa torim, and it turns out you're taking truma min hamukah from that which is close to you, and you're not going to be matame the truma because the bit in between at where they point is less than a kibetza. So you've got the tahor olives in the funnel, you've got the tamei olives at the bottom. The bottom part, the bottom olive must be less than a kibetza because the funnel can't hold that space, and that way they don't become tamei by touching. Now, lavali pachas bekibetza. Why do I need that the funnel entrance has to be less than an egg? I feel a kibetza, even if it's the size of an egg, like piruadina. Don't we say the olives in this funnel are sort of separate? So even if all the olives have a kibetza, they don't join up. So why does Reb Lai require? What's happened? Why does Reb Lai require the mashbech to be less than a share of a kibetza? Right? Why does Reb Lai require the mashbech, the funnel? You have Rabbi Isa, you may be able to see the Heilig and Tzaddik Reb Mendel there in the share. He's the one who keeps our internet going. He keeps our share going with all the covering the words and everything. Without him, this share would not be getting to you, Rabbi Isa. So lamali pachas bekibetza, afilu kibetza lo piruin. So surely they're sort of separate. So even if all the olives were kibetza, they don't really join up. So why does he require that the entrance to the funnel, the butt, should be less than a kibetza? So the Gemara answers, even if the less share kibetza, the top ones are not tamei, but he required the funnel to be less than a kibetza, shalei tamei zeisin haber, to reduce the amount of olives which can be found in that funnel, which will become tamei from the vinegar in the chavis. They'll become tamei from the vinegar in the barrel. So even though all the olives at that entrance to the funnel have a shir kibetza, but each one doesn't have that shir, and even though they're tamei by touching the vinegar in the barrel, they're not metamei the olives which are higher up. Right? The klal is all oichlin is mitzayif to shir kibetza to be metamei to us oichlin when they're connected, if they become one guf. If they're not connected, although they're touching, they don't join up to be metamei to us oichlin. Okay, Rabbi Isa. We will continue next week.